Thanos was the ultimate villain of the Marvel Universe. After 19 movies, we finally learned his dastardly plot. He's worried about overpopulation, so he's going to wish away half the universe.
The entire time I knew Thanos, he only ever had one goal. To bring balance to the universe by wiping out half of all life. If he gets all 6 Infinity Stones, he can do it with the snap of his fingers like this.
But it seems that nearly everyone was confused by this plan. From all across the political spectrum, I've seen the same critique. Thanos should have wished for double the resources, not half the life. Here's Brennan Lee Mulligan.
You see something like Thanos where it's like, I snap my finger and we need to free up more resources. And you're like, snap it and make twice as much resources. You have a...
Here's Ben Shapiro.
It's like Thanos, whose logic doesn't even make sense. Thanos who's like, there was overpopulation on my planet and that caused war. So what if I just make half of everything disappear? Okay, well, if you have like the glove that can manifest, why don't you just make extra planets, my dude?
Brennan is firmly on the left. Ben is firmly on the right. Typically, when they agree on something, it's like water is wet, the sky is blue. But here they're agreeing and they're wrong. That almost galvanized me to become a YouTuber, but then my wife got pregnant and then my hard drive melted as I made my first YouTube video, so I decided I had better things to do. But then I saw this clip of Josh Brolin, the actor who plays Thanos.
And the fan will come up and very seriously say, did you ever realize, I'm sorry to bother you, but did you ever realize that if you had the power to kill half the universe, you probably also had the power to create twice the resources? Good, yeah. Good point. Super smart.
Yeah. So I guess I have to make YouTube videos now. Let's talk about some 7-year-old movies. In Avengers Infinity War, Thanos' planet is destroyed by overpopulation. This theory that overpopulation will result in civilization collapse was championed by a number of environmental biologists, most famously by Paul Ehrlich, who was a Stanford biologist, I think still is a Stanford professor of biology. And he wrote his most famous work, The Population Bomb, in 1968, with his wife and colleague, Anne Ehrlich. In short, the argument goes that when you put yeast in a petri dish with yeast nutrient, the yeast will rapidly eat all of the nutrient, and then, once the food is gone, they will have a population collapse. Humans are bioorganisms like yeast. The Earth is a closed system like a petri dish. Ergo, we would face a similar collapse once we overconsume our resources.
It's a simple calculus. This universe is finite. Its resource is finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist.
The first editions of The Population Bomb, published in the 1960s, started with, "The battle to feed all of humanity is over. In the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any crash programs embarked upon now. At this late date, nothing can prevent a substantial increase in the world death rate."
Titan was like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution. Genocide.
Awkwardly, this didn't happen. But Paul Ehrlich made a lot of apocalyptic predictions throughout the decades that didn't come to pass. He also claimed that by the year 2000, England most likely wouldn't exist. He claimed that by 1980, all important life in the sea will be extinct. And he said that we ought to stop supplying countries like India with food because sober analysis shows a hopeless imbalance between food production and population. Our inadequate aid ought to be reserved for those who can survive. All of these predictions turned out not to be true. England still exists, there's plenty of life still in the ocean, and importantly, India is now self-sufficient in its food production. So had we taken Paul Ehrlich's advice and stopped providing with food, it would have caused widespread famines that were fundamentally unnecessary. Environmental doomsaying has the same track record as cultists screaming about lizard people in the park.
Prepare yourself. I have terrible news.
You do?
The world is going to end tomorrow at dawn.
Aw, nuts. You sure it's tomorrow?
Afraid so. Right at dawn. Zorp is going to be here.
But the question is why? The yeast analogy is really compelling. We do have finite resources. Why aren't we dying off? Well, Paul Ehrlich's answer is that his calculations were a little bit off. But don't worry, the apocalypse is just behind every corner.
All the scholarly work that I did on these texts indicated that the world would end.
Oh, gosh, I'm as disappointed as you are, Herb.
Yeah, but I went home and began to reevaluate the texts.
You don't say.
And I realized that I'd made some crucial errors.
Well, math is hard.
The actual end of the world is May 19th.
Okay, let's see what we've got. On the 19th, we can't give you the park. We have a spring spectacular free ice cream giveaway.
I misspoke. Yeah, it's May 20.
That is free.
Alternatively, the late economist Julian Simon makes compelling arguments to explain human flourishing. He argues that what distinguishes us from yeast is our ability to innovate. Innovations increase our productivity exponentially. As we get more population, we get more innovations. And based on historical data, that increase in productivity from population growth exceeds the increased consumption from population growth. Therefore, there's a positive effect of having more people on the economy. His most famous article was in the journal Science, and it was titled Resources, Population, Environment, an Oversupply of False Bad News. There, he argued that the influence of population size upon productivity increase suggests a long-run positive effect of additional people because we find new loads, invent better production methods, and discover new substitutes. However, in Avengers Infinity War, Thanos' world does collapse. So what's going on? I really see three explanations that are possible. First, Thanos is just wrong. He is our only source of information on why his planet collapses, so it's possible he's mistaken. Especially because the movie implies that he was exiled during the collapse, so it's possible that he just returned to the destroyed planet and assumed that's what happened. This theory is a little bit weakened because he has been going to planets and imposing this population control strategy and seeing good effect. But it's at least possible that this is true and that he's factually wrong. Second, his species could be distinct from humans in that their rate of innovation means that their productivity increase doesn't outpace their consumption increase, and thus his people did collapse. That would be interesting because it would mean that Thanos is right about his people, but wrong to impose that defect of his people on all life in the universe. Option 3 is that in this fictional world, the spread of all life outpaces the innovations needed to sustain it. This would mean that Thanos correctly diagnoses a problem in his universe and seeks to correct it. This is Thanos' perspective, so we should evaluate his wishes based on this perspective. But importantly, it also seems to be the perspective of the film.
You know, I saw a pod of whales when I was coming over the bridge.
In the Hudson.
There's fewer ships, cleaner water.
The objection of Brennan, Ben, and Brolin is that Thanos should have wished for double the resources, not half the life. But hopefully now you can see that Thanos thinks of all life in the universe as yeast at a petri dish. Doubling the size of the petri dish would do no good. Instead, he's proposing having the amount of yeast because he thinks it will teach the lesson that population needs to be controlled, contained. And he thinks that it'll teach that lesson, one, because that's how he learned about the danger and existential threat of overpopulation. And two, because people will see that the problem of overpopulation has been solved by reducing the population and will accept that new solution. I think this is the most correct reading of Thanos, particularly because in Endgame, he laments that people didn't learn the lesson he taught and didn't appreciate the solution he provided.
And as long as there are those that remember what was, there will always be those that are unable to accept what can be. I'm thankful. Because now, I know what I must do. I will shred this universe down to its last atom. Create a new one. A grateful universe.
So one of the things Thanos wanted was a paradigm shift. He wanted people to believe that overpopulation was a problem and to take it seriously. But if that's all he wanted, then he wished poorly. Because the first rule of wishing is to wish for what you want, not for something that leads to what you want. But I do see a possible explanation to defend his wish. The Ehrlichs didn't merely argue that population collapse was an avoidable future we should guard against. Remember that quote from earlier. The battle is over. hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any programs embarked upon now. Nothing can prevent a substantial increase in the world death rate. Perhaps Thanos thinks this of his universe. Perhaps he was trying to sneak 2 wishes into 1 wish. First, he wanted to decrease the population to correct current overpopulation. And second, he wanted a paradigm shift so that people knew that overpopulation was a problem and preserved life in the universe. Although a thing that I've ignored so far is that he actually does make 2 wishes. His second wish is to destroy the wish-granting device such that his earlier wish can't be undone. This is smart. We're going to make it rule number 2 of wish-making. Prevent others from undoing your wish. But this means that really Thanos wanted 3 things. He wanted a resource shift, he wanted a paradigm shift, and he wanted his wishes to not be reversible. But in Endgame, after he makes his second wish, he's on the brink of death. It seems that the wish-granting device in these movies, the Infinity Gauntlet, takes a lot of physical effort out of the user when it grants us a wish. So it seems unlikely that he would have been able to make 3 wishes. This means, if he knew that that was the problem, that he needed to try to squeeze 3 wishes into 2. So what he chose to do was try to lump the resource shift and the paradigm shift into 1 wish by halving the population. Thus, it's at least possible that what Thanos wished for in the movies was a reasonably efficient thing to do. But ultimately, he was wrong. In the end, Thanos loses, but not because his ideology was defeated, but because the Avengers found a way to undo his wish, and then decided that they would rather choose life, choose to believe in hope that they would find solutions to the problems they faced, and rejected the idea that killing half the population was an acceptable cost. Ultimately, Thanos didn't get 2 wishes in 1. He didn't get the paradigm shift, and he didn't make his wishes undoable. So hopefully you can now see that doubling the resources is a worse solution for Thanos than having the amount of life. But in preparing for this video, I did find an alternative suggestion.
I just don't understand. Like, your thing is like, I can wish whatever into existence. Your wish is half of everything is dead. Why wouldn't you wish that the universe supports everyone?
Yeah, that's just better. Thanos wants the resource shift and he wants the population shift because he wants the universe to be able to support life. So he was wishing for something that leads to what he wants, not what he wants. He should have wished that the universe was life-sustaining and then wished that his wish was unreversible. Whoopsie doopsie. Well, that's enough talking about 7-year-old movies. I've been Buck Kansas. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps out a lot. I'm going to make a follow-up video talking about Paul Ehrlich and Julian Simon in more detail because it's my favorite beef in academia. I've left a lot of stuff on the table, including their very famous bet about the future. And I think it's a reasonable explanation of how to pick between 2 disagreeing experts, which is a topic I want to talk about more broadly. If I finish that video, it will be linked here and in the description below. If not, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Hail Zort!